We are looking at all the latest NHL trade and free agent rumors as we get ready for free agent frenzy here coming up on Wednesday. Today we've got the latest on Jack Eichel, Dougie Hamilton. We got teams like Columbus and Arizona appear to be wide open for business. We have some more signings, another buyout, and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of news to talk about here today, where we have some signings, a buyout, and some other trade and free agent talk. So let's get started here with all the latest news. First up, the Detroit Red Wings have decided to re-sign defenseman Marc Staal, who agrees to a one-year contract worth $2 million and a full no-move clause. Of course, with Staal, just like last year, same idea. Any of these guys that are agreeing to these kind of contracts, they're going to want a no-move to make sure that they're going to be there for the season, or if they do get asked to be traded at the deadline to a playoff team, that they have, a little bit more control over where they end up. So, of course, Staal, still a veteran guy who can kind of take a spot there in Detroit. Obviously, they're trying to get younger and go through this rebuild, but they do need a few vets around, and he's been able to play a role there. I know we had a rough start last year, but after a while, seemed to settle in and kind of, get a little bit better as the year went on. So he will return for another season. We also had the LA Kings re-sign forward Trevor Moore, who gets a $1.8 million average annual value extension over the next 2 years as well. He was a pending restricted free agent. So obviously decent signing there by the LA Kings. Trevor Moore, of course, a player they picked up in the trade with Toronto a couple years back. Veteran defenseman Niklas Hjalmarsson of the Arizona Coyotes and formerly of the Chicago Blackhawks, where he won 3 Stanley Cups, is calling it a career and is retiring. Now, apparently, according to local media, Craig Morgan, you probably won't get an official statement or an announcement from Hjalmarsson or his camp. He's pretty quiet, pretty reserved kind of guy from what he's saying, and he kind of just wants to ride off into the sunset and not really make a big deal about it. But they have confirmed that Hjalmarsson will not be returning to the Coyotes and has announced his retirement. Obviously, he had a pretty solid career as a really rugged defenseman. He's blocked a lot of shots in his time. He was an important piece with the Hawks during their Stanley Cup. You could almost call it a dynasty. Really, 3 cups over that span was almost unheard of today. So, they had a ton of success there, and he was a big part of that. So we wish him the best as he calls it a career and rides off into the sunset here. Now, we did get word today that the Vancouver Canucks are buying out Jake Virtanen, something that we've speculated on here for some time. He is currently on unconditional waiver, so the buyout will be effective tomorrow at noon Eastern time once he clears that. And then obviously another team would have a chance to pick him up. But when it's for buyouts, it never happens, of course. But it's just a process on how it works. Then he will become an unrestricted free agent, and he can seek another contract and see if he can get a fresh start somewhere else and get his career back on track. From what we can see from Vancouver media, I think it sounds like there wasn't strictly related to the off-ice pending legal issues that he's facing, his accusations that he's dealing with. But it's more so just based on his hockey career and the fact that he has not really lived up to expectations and has kind of regressed in developing as a hockey player, I guess you could say. That's kind of what they're saying about it, which does make sense. I do think to a degree the off-ice stuff probably does play a bit of a role, but at the end of the day, they're needing to free up as much cap space as they possibly can, and obviously this is a big help for that. They get all but $50,000 of his cap hit back this season in cap savings. There will be a bit of a hit next year, but it's not very big. It's only like $500K, so it's a small price to pay to move on from that contract. Since he's under age 27 or doesn't have 7 pro seasons and still in RFA status, then it's a 1/3 buyout over twice the period of time. Instead of when you're in UFA status, it's 2/3 buyout, so it costs you twice as much. So obviously a small price to pay to move on from that contract. We've already seen Vancouver complete that massive trade with Arizona, where they picked up some hefty deals when it comes to OEL's contract. Connor Garland should be a beauty for them. I expect him to be a real good fit there, likely play a top 6 role consistently, but OEL's contract has a lot of term and $8.25 million per year on it, which is going to be big, but they did offset 3 bad contracts going to Arizona when it comes to Beagle, Roussel, and Louis Eriksson, who's finally out of the picture in Vancouver. But the only problem is those contracts were all on their final year, whereas Ekman Larsson has an extended period of time on that contract. So let's hope he can get reinvigorated here and get his career back on track, as even he admitted himself that he hasn't really had the greatest last few years, and even on an effort level wasn't completely always there. So he obviously needs to get things changing, and hopefully the Canucks can help him do that. Otherwise, this could be a disaster. I think the Garland part of this trade will always be good. Got a lot of potential there. But I know on Elliot Friedman's 31 Thoughts podcast today, he said he felt that this was a type of trade for Vancouver that they have to win next year. They have to improve. They have to be like a playoff team and at least get some moderate level of success here in the playoffs, or there could be some major changes coming, not only on the ice, but off the ice, likely in the form of Jim Benning and company possibly being shown the door here. This is a way for them to take a big chance. They needed a D anyway, and I understand that Ekman Larsson and them have kind of been flirting with this idea for over a year, but it is a big risk, so we'll have to see what happens. But obviously the Canucks are not quite done here. They're still looking to move Nate Schmidt, and there could be some other moves here depending on what they do with Alex Edler and Travis Hamonic, both of which could end up departing via free agency. So if they do, they're going to still have a few more holes in the blue line that they need to address, and we'll see about a Schmidt trade here as we approach free agency as well. Now, the Edmonton Oilers announced today that they tendered qualifying offers to many of their RFAs, but a couple did not and will now become unrestricted free agents. And that includes forwards Dominic Cahoon and Jujhar Khaira. So Khaira's from BC. He's a bottom six forward, somebody that the Canucks could use. Just hopefully if Jim Benning goes after him, he doesn't sign him to one of those bad contracts he just got rid of, because I know there's a little apprehension in that regard based on past history, but he could be a good fit there if they can sign him for the right price to come home to BC and see what he can do in a bottom six role for them. So stay tuned for that. But other guys like Benson, Yamamoto, and Marudi all have confirmed that they've received their qualifying offer, so they'll definitely be sticking around in Edmonton, at least it appears so. A lot more of today's information comes from the latest 31 Thoughts podcast and Elliot Friedman. He's talking about some free agent stuff and some trade talk. When it comes to free agent talk, he still feels strongly that there's a really good chance that David Savard will end up with the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, they are going to be without Shea Weber all season, and it looks like he's been one of their top targets to come in and play that role. Now, of course, he's not going to be able to replace Weber completely, but at least he can play the minutes. He can play, a similar style of game to a degree, so it's not going to be quite the same, but he's, one of the main candidates they're looking at to try to take on those minutes for them next season. I'm not sure what kind of contract he's looking for, just coming off a Stanley Cup win in Tampa, but you could make the argument that he was really sheltered well with the Lightning playing a lower role. Obviously, a lot of really strong D ahead of him there with the Lightning organization, so I just hope it's a case where we don't see an overpayment because of the Cup. I mean, yes, he helped them, yes, he earned the right to be part of that Cup winning team, but it's still, Weber's a big name playing a big role for the Habs. Just not quite sure David Savard can fill those shoes, but we'll see what they end up doing. But according to Friedman, he feels that he's their main target, at least as of right now, for that top D spot. And looking at some other top free agents, Friedman also believes that a guy like Dougie Hamilton's going to have more conversations here with Carolina over the next 48 hours leading to free agency. Looks as though the Canes do want to take another stab at bringing him back and re-signing him. It appears they're very interested in making it a priority, but at the same time, they want to know ahead of free agency so that if they're not going to be able to sign him, they're going to know, so they can kind of put their efforts elsewhere and decide what they're going to do with this blue line, to kind of replace him or what they're going to do in that regard. So another team that obviously we talked a little bit about yesterday that Friedman and Dave Pagnotta and a few others are mentioning as being big players in free agency that would target a guy like Hamilton would be the Devils. So certainly look for them to be probably one of Carolina's toughest competitions. It's believed that other teams like the Habs and the Leafs did kind of check in on Hamilton just to see what kind of price tags we're looking at, but he's well priced out of either of their cap situation, so it's not something we're really likely going to see. With the Calgary Flames losing Mark Giordano, they're certainly another big team to watch when it comes to the blue line. I don't know if they'd have any interest in trying to bring back the former Flame and Dougie Hamilton. Obviously, they moved him, after only one season of being there, so I'm not really sure that that's something they're going to do, but still, it's a situation where they're going to be looking to try to find a top left shot D, preferably anyways, where Hamilton's a right-hander. So hard to say what happens, but both the Habs and the Leafs and the Devils, amongst other teams here, are all kind of in that game for top defenders. So we'll have to see see. New Jersey could be a surprise team to spend some money because they're one of the teams with the most cap space around the NHL. Now, a few other free agents to keep an eye on as well, and these could be players we see sign ahead of the free agent frenzy on Wednesday, and that's some guys that were recently bought out that don't have to wait because they're already officially UFAs, and that's Keith Yandle and Ryan Suter, as well as Zach Parise. Now, it's believed Parise is almost, I suggest, a guarantee to go to the Islanders. When it comes to Suter and Yandle, though, there's a variety of places they could end up. Many feel that Yandle is pretty likely to end up in Boston, but it's believed that he is talking to a variety of teams. And Ryan Suter is another one for Boston. Boston won't go for both of these guys. I really can't see it. It'd be one or the other. Right now, it seems like Yandle might be more likely, and it also seems like more likely that Yandle would be willing to accept a one-year deal, whereas Suter seems to be looking for multi-years from what reports are out there. So that could be, a sticking point for some teams to be able to handle bringing him on or not. Other teams that he's talking to besides Boston seems to include the Islanders, the Dallas Stars, the St. Louis Blues, amongst others. There was believed to be some interest with the Avalanche, but apparently that's not looking like it's going to work. So I don't think they're pursuing that any longer, but the other teams are certainly well in the mix. But it's believed that Suter especially wants to have a decision made by Monday sometime or Tuesday at the latest before free agency kicks in Wednesday. Basically trying to get ahead of the market here, make sure he has more options on the table and can make his decision before everybody else has that opportunity to officially sign here as well. Now, before we jump into any further in today's video, I do need to pause for a moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken a level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So thanks very much for watching that promotional video. I do greatly appreciate it. Getting into the additional trade and free agent rumors here today. The Arizona Coyotes are very, very wide open for business, according to multiple reports from Dave Pagnotta as well as Elliot Friedman. They're both indicating that this team has made several deals and they're far from being finished. It's pretty much everybody on that roster that's not named Jacob Chychrun is available for the right price. Doesn't mean they'll all be traded, but it looks as though they could all be had for the right price tag, including the guys they just picked up from the Canucks, including Eriksson, Beagle, and Roussel. It is possible we could see a buyout on one or two of those contracts as well, given the fact they're down to 1 year on the deal. So they could basically move them off the roster and just deal with a smaller cap hit, but it'd be for 2 years instead of one. But it's going to boil down to what else they can take on here, because the ultimate goal is to stockpile as many picks and prospects for the future as possible, and obviously taking on bad contracts will be a part of that. But, at the same time, they can only handle so much within their cap space. So they could look to do that, but hard to say if they will 100%, but there's an option there. But basically everybody, including Phil Kessel, Christian Dvorak is getting a lot of attention, but I think Dvorak likely won't be moved until some more players like an Eichel or somebody higher profile as a center's move, because teams are going to switch their attention to, lower priced players once that kind of happens, and they didn't make the deal happen. Of course, you got, like I said, Kessel, Dvorak, even Nick Schmaltz is rumored to be out there. Darcy Kemper is another player, and I do believe they would move Clayton Keller as well for the right price. Now, he has a longer term contract that would probably be trickier to do. I mean, Schmaltz and Dvorak have a little bit of term as well, so it's not, going to be simple deals to do, and I don't think they're as much in a rush to move them. But at the same time, if a team comes along and is willing to give them, enough picks and prospects to build around, they're certainly going to consider that. But their older players that are shorter term deals are definitely players that they would like to move. Kessel probably being one of the main ones, as well as Kumper. Those two guys would be probably the easiest to move right now. And like I said, we'll see what happens. But they're wide open for business. If anybody wants anybody on that roster, not named Jacob Chikrin, give the Coyotes a call and see what you can work out. Now, when it comes to CBJ, the Columbus Blue Jackets, they've been a busy team, had a really solid draft. They traded Seth Jones, and there could be other players on the move as well. They also traded Cam Atkinson for Jake Voracek. And I don't think they're done. They're still going to be exploring a few things here. But I know for sure that one thing that's been coming up, according to Elliot Friedman, and it doesn't mean they're going to move him, but after all the trades we've seen recently, they are getting calls on Zach Werenski. Now, he's a little bit younger than Seth Jones, a little bit cheaper, but he's not signed super long-term either. So it could be a scenario that they need to figure out where things stand with him. Does he want to stay? Do they want to keep him? And, where they are getting interest, he's a really solid offensive D. So, he's younger, he's left-hand shot. There's a lot to like about Zach Werenski. So to me, I have no way to suggest. I have no doubt there'd be no shortage of interest. So not to say that they're pushing, trying to shop him and trade him for sure. But they're getting calls and they're listening, and I guess Friedman left it with saying we'll see where this goes. So, if the right price is offered, wouldn't be shocking to see him on the go. And Dave Pagnotta is also saying that they're expected to be doing contract negotiations here with Laine, which likely have already started to some degree, pending restricted free agent forward. And even though Laine's a fairly big name, is owed a pretty good-sized qualifying offer, they're already talking about maybe taking some trade offers for him as well. They're engaging in, early conversations, you could say, with a few teams around the league, making him available. I think they just kind of want to test the market to see what kind of offers are out there, so that if contract negotiations do not go well, they have something to fall back on and they can move to another direction to talk to some teams that are showing interest. So I think right now, like I said, they're just trying to see who's interested, what might be the market for them, and kind of lay all the groundwork so that if things don't go well, they have some of the groundwork done to progress on a trade. But doesn't mean they're going to move them, but it's something they're open to, again, for the right price, depending on the contract negotiations, etc. So we could continue to see some fairly significant movement with the Blue Jackets. Now, speaking of New Jersey being a team to watch in free agency when it comes to guys like Dougie Hamilton, they're also a team to watch when it comes to the trade market. It's believed that they've had conversation with Vegas around Marc Andre Fleury as well as Robin Lehner. Now, there is some speculation that a team was close to making a trade for Lehner and something fell through. I'm not sure really from the Vegas side of things what they exactly want to do. To me, it sounds like there's some conflicted people within the organization. I get the impression, and this is just my take, that management like McPhee and McCrimmon would prefer to move Fleury, but the owner, Bill Foley, doesn't want to do that, and he'd prefer to move Lehner and let Fleury stay and retire. But the problem is, Fleury's only got one more year left, and if let's say he doesn't have as good a year next year, at some point you're going to see more of a decline. Obviously, Fleury's game was starting to decline. Like, he went to Vegas after leaving Pittsburgh, had a fantastic year. Obviously, was a hurt part of it, but still, he boosted himself back up. But then his numbers were getting a little bit worse. He was declining slowly. But then all of a sudden, they bring in Lehner, and he had another motivating reason to kind of get going again. And then boom, he wins a Vezina. So this just seems to be a trend with him. So I don't know that you can expect what you saw last year for too much longer. He is getting up there too. So do they hang on to Fleury and trade Lehner? And then what do they do in a couple of years' time when Fleury's done? Then they don't have the goalie to turn to, where Leonard's a lot younger, So to me, it doesn't make sense to trade Leonard. Why would you bring him in and get him signed to a longer extension if you're just going to move him? It just seems weird to me. So, but there are teams that are apparently calling and having conversations around both goaltenders, so we'll see. But the Devils are one of those. They're looking to have somebody come in to work with Blackwood to be like a 1A, 1B type of scenario, which is the common trend you're seeing in the NHL right now. And one of those guys would make an excellent tandem partner for the young goaltender. They're not the only ones, as believe Chicago also looking for a goaltender as well, and have had exploratory talks with multiple teams, including Vegas. So we'll see about that. It's also believed that New Jersey's also been having some conversations with the Vancouver Canucks around Braden Holtby too. So of course, he's only got 1 year left in his deal. Could be a potential option. And I've also seen reports too about the Capitals maybe seeing about bringing Holtby back. That's a possibility. we could end up seeing. Of course, they lost Vanacek in the expansion draft. Craig Anderson's expected to be retiring, so that leaves Samsonov. And I think they still have Phoenix Copley under contract, but they could bring back Holtby, even if it's just for a year. It's especially if the Canucks keep a little salary or something like that, it might not be overly expensive to bring him back and have one more crack at it with the Capitals. Not a guarantee, but I did see reports that they were rumored to be having some conversations with the Canucks as well. And of course, Alex Ovechkin expected to have his contract wrapped up here soon. Many feel it's likely going to be a 3 to 4 year deal around the $10 million mark per year. So we'll see. That could be signed and announced before Wednesday, or it could be done on Wednesday. I'm not sure when we'll get confirmation, but it's believed that it's either done or they're putting the finishing touches on it. It's just a matter of making it finalized and formal here anytime. So we'll have to keep our eyes open for that soon. Now, lastly here, I want to touch on Jack Eichel. We get through the 2021 NHL draft, and we've seen the Sabres make some big moves, including Ristolainen and Reinhart, but no Eichel deal has happened here as of yet. We heard comments from Kevin Adams saying that, there's really no deadline and that he'd be okay if Jack came to camp in the fall, and I'm sure Jack is probably kind of rolling his eyes saying that ain't going to happen if he could hear what he was saying. But at the end of the day here, they have to find the right deal. I understand why they want to be patient, but from what Friedman's saying and others, the prices are just still too high, and it's not that the Sabres don't deserve a high price. If you look at what prices were paid for guys like Seth Jones, they have every right to be asking for a high price tag, but it doesn't mean anybody's going to have to pay it. Prices are determined by what people are willing to pay. You can charge whatever you want, but if nobody will pay it, then it's not worth it. It's just that simple. Supply and demand 101. So when it comes to Jack Eichel, obviously, they feel he's valued at a certain level. They're probably not really wrong, but if nobody wants to pay that price because they know he wants out and they're trying to swing that leverage, then at some point the price tag is going to have to come down so they can get a deal done. But at the end of the day, one of the big issues is that the Sabres really mainly want prospects and picks. They don't want to take much of anything off NHL roster players. And all these teams to take $10 million on, it's almost impossible to not shed at least a player off your roster to level out some of the money. And it's just almost impossible to strike a deal. Like, it's still believed the Rangers and the Wild are probably the two teams that are interested the most, but they're not close on a deal. I've seen some reports when it comes to the Rangers that Friedman was saying that they wanted to include either Braden Schneider or Nils Lundqvist on the blue line, and that the Rangers didn't want to do that. I find that hard to believe. I've had reports and I've had some intel given to me saying Braden Schneider was in the conversation, so I don't know what's accurate there, but still, to me, something like that should not hold up a Jack Eichel trade if you're haggling over prospect defensemen. They're good prospect defensemen, but at the same time, come on. I don't see that being a deal breaker. To me, it makes more sense that the Rangers are trying to push a little bit more of money off the NHL roster. The Sabres probably don't want it. They're pushing for maybe a solid, more younger players. It might take the Rangers up on the offer to include Capo Caco, for example. I don't know that they really want to do that, but if they don't, it may not happen. It's just that simple. Obviously, the Sabres are driving a hard bargain, and they should. This is a star player that doesn't hit the open market very often. But other teams like Calgary, even Montreal apparently sniffing around, Vegas, to a degree Anaheim, LA, and what Friedman's saying is a lot of them keep checking in, they take a stab at it, and they're like, no, we can't do that, then they're in and they're out. That's why you keep seeing all these reports about teams being out, then they're in again, and then they're out, and then they're in again, and it's probably going to be that way. They keep kind of checking in, hoping the price is going to change, and if the price doesn't change, then they're back out. It's just that simple. So we'll see, but right now the Sabres are not budging on the price. But like I said before, I still would bet on Minnesota or the Rangers being the front runners. But it just really boils down if they're willing to pay the price tag that the Sabres are looking for. They're just as, it's hard to say when it's going to budge. But at some point here, we have to, you think that the Sabres are going to have to make a change if they can't get what they're looking for to lower the price a little bit. Because they just can't have this going into training camp. To me, they just can't. Adams himself even seemed totally disconnected with where things are at with Eichel. Seems like he's not keeping up with him. Like, he's talking to his agent lots, yes, but they're so focused on a trade that he's not really focused on where his rehab is at, what is he doing to stay in shape, all those things. And at the same time, it just seems weird. It just seems like listening to Adams talk about Eichel, it's almost like in his mind he's already gone, but at the same time he's saying that it's okay if he returns in training camp, not a big deal, we'll do what we have to. I don't know. To me, they need to get a deal done here soon and move on from the distraction, but we'll see. I understand on prices, but at the same time, something's got to give. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today. We'll discuss further down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors and all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.